It was an ordinary morning in the small, cozy home of the Williams family. The sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow across the kitchen. Emma, a sweet 8-year-old girl with big blue eyes and a bright smile, was playing in the living room. Her mother, Sarah, was preparing breakfast in the kitchen, humming along to her favorite song. Everything seemed perfectly normal. But as Sarah glanced over at her daughter, she noticed something was off. Emma was sitting quietly, not moving around as she usually did. Her small hands were resting on her lap, and her eyes seemed distant, as though lost in thought. Sarah, concerned by her daughter's unusual stillness, walked over to check on her. When she crouched down beside Emma, she noticed that something wasn't right. Emma's belly, usually flat and small, looked swollen, unnaturally so. Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she gently placed her hand on Emma's stomach. "Sweetheart, are you feeling okay?" Sarah asked softly, her voice filled with concern. Emma looked up at her mother with wide eyes, her expression one of confusion. "I'm fine, Mommy," she whispered, but there was something in her voice that didn't sound quite right. It was almost as if she was trying to convince herself that everything was normal. Sarah's concern grew. She tried to push her unease aside, thinking perhaps Emma had just eaten too much or was bloated from something she'd eaten the night before. But the swelling of Emma's stomach was too pronounced to be ignored. It wasn't like anything Sarah had ever seen before. It wasn't just a little round belly. It was much larger, more pronounced, and it looked wrong. "Emma, honey, what's going on?" Sarah asked again, kneeling down to look her daughter in the eyes. Emma hesitated for a moment, then nervously pulled at her dress. "I don't know, Mommy," she said, her voice trembling. "I've been feeling funny in my tummy for a few days now." A cold shiver ran down Sarah's spine. She felt a lump form in her throat as her mind raced. What could be happening? What was going on with her daughter? Sarah reached for Emma's hand, trying to comfort her, but inside, her thoughts were a whirlwind of fear and confusion. She gently guided Emma to her bedroom, sitting her on the bed as she examined her daughter's belly more closely. The room felt smaller now, the air thick with tension. Sarah's mind raced as she tried to come up with logical explanations. Could it be some kind of stomach infection, a food allergy, or something even more serious? But none of the possibilities seemed to fit. Emma didn't seem sick, not in the traditional sense. There were no signs of fever or discomfort other than the swelling. Her daughter was acting completely normal, except for the sudden, unexplained bulge in her stomach. Sarah tried to stay calm, but her hands were shaking. She ran her fingers through her hair, trying to think straight. She couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something was terribly wrong. It was as if her daughter's body was trying to communicate something, but Sarah couldn't make sense of it. After a few moments of silence, Emma spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mommy, I don't want to worry you, but something's been happening. It feels strange. It's like there's something inside me." The words hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. "Something inside you?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "What do you mean, honey?" Emma looked up at her mother, her eyes filled with fear. "I don't know, Mommy. It feels like there's a baby inside me, but I don't know how. I haven't done anything. I swear." Sarah's heart raced as her daughter's words echoed in her ears. "A baby?" she whispered in disbelief. It made no sense. Emma was just a little girl, too young for something like this. But the swelling in Emma's stomach, the strange feeling she described, was real. Suddenly, everything around Sarah seemed to fade away. The warm kitchen, the soft hum of the radio, the sounds of birds chirping outside. All of it felt far away. The only thing that mattered now was Emma. Her daughter was in pain, in confusion, and Sarah didn't know how to fix it. She didn't know what to do, but she knew she had to act fast. Without thinking, Sarah grabbed her phone from the nightstand. Her hand shook as she dialed the number she hoped she would never have to call. 911. "What's your emergency?" The operator's calm voice answered. My daughter. Something's wrong with her, Sarah said, her voice breaking. She's only 8, and her belly is swollen. She says there's something inside her. I don't know what's happening. Please help me. The operator remained calm, asking for more details, but all Sarah could focus on was her daughter's tear-filled eyes, filled with fear and confusion. She had no answers, only more questions. As she awaited the arrival of help, Sarah's mind raced. What was happening to Emma? How had they ended up here, in this terrifying, inexplicable moment? But even as panic began to rise within her, she knew one thing for sure. She would do anything to protect her little girl and get her the help she so desperately needed. And with that, the unknown mystery of Emma's condition began to unfold. The minutes seemed to stretch on endlessly as Sarah sat beside Emma, waiting for the help she hoped would come. She could hear her heart thumping loudly in her chest, each beat carrying with it the weight of the uncertainty that hung heavy in the room. The air felt thick, and each breath she took seemed more difficult than the last. The room, once comforting and familiar, now felt foreign, like a space filled with questions she had no answers to. Sarah's mind kept racing back to the words Emma had said. It feels like there's something inside me. No matter how many times she repeated them in her head, they didn't make sense. There was no logical explanation for what her daughter was experiencing. Emma had never shown any signs of illness, and as far as Sarah knew, nothing had changed in their life that could explain this mysterious condition. But the swelling in Emma's stomach was undeniable. It was there, large and pressing, and it had to be the source of Emma's confusion and fear. Sarah tried to stay calm, but every passing moment made her question her own instincts. What if this wasn't something simple? What if it was much worse? Just as Sarah began to feel overwhelmed, the sound of a car pulling up in the driveway broke through her thoughts. She jumped to her feet, a wave of relief and dread washing over her simultaneously. It was the paramedics. They were here. The doorbell rang, and Sarah rushed to open it, her breath catching in her throat. 2 paramedics stood at the door, 1 man and 1 woman. They looked at her with concern, clearly noticing the fear in Sarah's eyes. Without wasting any time, they followed Sarah to the living room where Emma sat, still looking pale and frightened. The paramedic woman, whose name tag read Amanda, knelt down beside Emma, her tone gentle but firm. Hey there, sweetie. My name's Amanda. We're here to help you. Can you tell me a little more about how you're feeling? Emma hesitated, her small hands clutching the edges of her dress. She looked up at her mother, her eyes filled with tears. Sarah gave her daughter a reassuring smile, squeezing her hand. It was clear Emma wanted to be brave, but the confusion and fear were too much to mask. I don't know, Miss Amanda, Emma said softly. I just feel strange. My tummy hurts, and it feels full, like there's something inside me. But I don't know what it is. Amanda nodded, trying to soothe the little girl. That's okay, sweetie. We're going to take good care of you. Let's just get some checks done, okay? As Amanda carefully examined Emma's belly, Sarah couldn't help but feel a tightening in her chest. The paramedics moved quickly, asking Emma to lie down and pressing gently on her stomach. They spoke to each other in hushed tones, and Sarah felt her heart race as she watched them work. They didn't say much, but the serious looks they exchanged made her stomach churn. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Amanda stood up and motioned for the other paramedic, a man named Daniel, to come over. They stepped aside for a moment, speaking in quiet, urgent whispers. Sarah couldn't make out what they were saying, but the worry etched on their faces was unmistakable. This was more than just a simple stomach issue. This was something much more serious. Sarah, Amanda said gently, her voice low. We need to take Emma to the hospital. It's not just bloating or a simple stomach ache. We're going to get her checked out thoroughly. It's important. Sarah felt the ground beneath her feet shift. Her body went cold as Amanda's words sank in. It's important. What did that mean? Was Emma's condition worse than she had imagined? Without another word, Sarah agreed, her heart pounding in her chest. They couldn't wait. Not anymore. The paramedics quickly prepared Emma for transport, strapping her gently into the ambulance as Sarah climbed in beside her, clutching her daughter's hand tightly. The ride to the hospital felt like a blur. Every bump in the road seemed to echo through Sarah's chest, and every second stretched on interminably. Emma remained silent, her small fingers curled around her mother's, as if trying to hold on to the only source of comfort she knew. When they arrived at the hospital, the staff were ready for them. Nurses and doctors moved swiftly, directing Sarah and the paramedics to the examination rooms. The hospital was a world of bright lights and sterile smells, and Sarah felt as though she was in a daze. The familiar comfort of her home seemed miles away. It wasn't long before the doctors started performing tests, ultrasounds, blood work, and scans. They asked Emma to lie still, but it was clear from the way she fidgeted that she was growing increasingly anxious. Sarah stayed by her side, trying to comfort her, but she could feel her own anxiety mounting with every passing minute. What were the doctors going to find? What was happening to her daughter? Finally, after what felt like hours, the doctor returned with the results. He was a tall man with kind eyes, but his expression was serious. Sarah could feel the weight of his gaze, and a wave of dread washed over her. "Mrs. Williams," the doctor began, "we've run all the necessary tests. I need to tell you that what we're dealing with here is very rare and concerning. Emma is experiencing a condition that involves an abnormal growth inside her. It's not a typical medical issue, and the source of the growth is unclear at this point." Sarah's mind spun. An abnormal growth inside her daughter. She could barely process the words. The doctor continued, "We'll need to conduct more tests to determine exactly what's causing this. It could be a number of things, but we need to act quickly." The words "act quickly" echoed in Sarah's mind, and the true magnitude of the situation began to sink in. This wasn't just a mystery. This was a crisis. Emma was in danger, and Sarah had no idea how to fix it. As the doctor prepared to make arrangements for further testing, Sarah sat by her daughter's side, holding her hand. The comforting warmth of her little girl's touch was all that kept her grounded in that moment, and she vowed to do whatever it took to protect her. But the road ahead was uncertain, and the truth was only beginning to unfold. The situation had gone from bad to worse, and Sarah could feel her heart pounding faster with every passing moment. She had always prided herself on being calm under pressure, but this was different. This was her daughter, her sweet, innocent little girl, who was in pain, and Sarah was helpless. As she sat beside Emma in the sterile hospital room, watching the machines beep around them, a gnawing feeling of dread tightened around her chest. The doctors were still running tests, trying to piece together the puzzle of Emma's condition. They had told her that they needed time to figure out what was causing the strange swelling in Emma's belly, but Sarah knew that time was something they couldn't afford. Every minute spent waiting felt like an eternity. Emma, who had been so full of energy just a few days ago, now lay silently in the bed, her small face pale and drawn. She hadn't spoken much since they arrived at the hospital, her voice barely a whisper whenever she did. Sarah couldn't help but notice the fear in her daughter's eyes. Emma was frightened, and that fear was contagious. It spread through Sarah's veins like a poison, making it harder and harder to breathe. Despite the efforts of the medical team, there was still no clear explanation for what was happening to Emma. No one could tell her what was causing the swelling or why Emma's condition seemed so unusual. The uncertainty gnawed at Sarah, and with each unanswered question, she felt more and more powerless. What if they couldn't figure it out? What if the doctors missed something critical? At that moment, Sarah knew she couldn't sit idly by and wait for answers anymore. She had to do something, anything, to help her daughter. And in her panic, one thought echoed in her mind: call 911. It might seem strange to consider calling emergency services again when they were already in the hospital, but Sarah wasn't sure if the hospital staff could provide the answers she so desperately needed. Something told her that this was bigger than just a simple visit to the ER. She needed more than just a doctor's opinion. She needed someone who could get to the bottom of this, someone who could give her real answers, someone who could help Emma, and quickly. Without a second thought, Sarah reached for her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed the number that had become synonymous with life-saving help. 911. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves, but the panic kept rising within her. As the phone rang, her mind raced, and she couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. 911. What's your emergency? The operator's calm voice came through the phone, a sharp contrast to the chaos swirling in Sarah's mind. My daughter. Sarah's voice cracked as she spoke, the words barely escaping her lips. She's only 8, and something's wrong with her. Her belly is swollen, and she's saying there's something inside her. The doctors here don't know what's going on, and I don't know what to do. Please, help me. The operator listened intently, her tone still calm, but now filled with urgency. Ma'am, I understand. Can you tell me where you are, and what's happening with your daughter? Sarah quickly gave the operator her location, her voice quivering as she spoke. We're at the hospital now, but they don't know what's wrong. They're running tests, but no one can tell me what's going on. My daughter's scared, and I am too. She says it feels like there's something inside her, and I don't know what that means. The operator was quick to respond, asking Sarah to stay on the line as she relayed the situation to the appropriate emergency response team. We are dispatching a medical team to your location immediately. Stay with your daughter, keep her calm, and we'll get help to you as quickly as possible. Sarah's grip on the phone tightened as she tried to calm herself. The fear in her chest wouldn't subside, but she knew that calling 911 was the right thing to do. It wasn't just about the doctors anymore. It was about making sure that Emma received the care and attention she needed before things got worse. She couldn't afford to wait any longer. Every minute spent in uncertainty felt like a lifetime, and Sarah knew that if she didn't act now, she might regret it. Thank you, Sarah whispered into the phone. Please hurry. The operator assured her that help was on the way, and they would keep her updated. As Sarah hung up the phone, she turned to Emma, her heart breaking as she saw the fear still clouding her daughter's eyes. She gently stroked Emma's hair, trying to comfort her, but the weight of the situation was too much. Emma's small hand reached up to hold her mother's, her fingers clutching tightly as if she were afraid of letting go. I'm here, sweetie, Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. We're going to get through this. I won't leave you. I promise. Emma nodded, but her eyes were filled with doubt. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but she could feel the fear in her mother's voice, and it made her even more afraid. Sarah could see the toll it was taking on her daughter, and it tore her apart. She couldn't help but wonder what was going through Emma's young mind. What was she thinking? What had caused this mysterious illness to suddenly strike her? As they waited for the emergency response team to arrive, Sarah did everything she could to keep Emma calm. She told her stories, stroked her hair, and reassured her that everything would be okay. But deep down, Sarah wasn't sure if everything would be okay. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that the situation was far beyond anything she had ever expected. Minutes later, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed in the hallway outside Emma's room. Sarah's heart raced as she stood up, her hand still holding Emma's. The door swung open, and the emergency response team entered, quickly assessing the situation. Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her as the team got to work, but even as the professionals took charge, Sarah couldn't shake the overwhelming feeling that something was terribly wrong. The 911 call had been a last resort, a desperate attempt to get answers. But as the team worked tirelessly to figure out what was happening, Sarah couldn't help but wonder, what kind of truth would they uncover? And would it be the answer they so desperately needed? The uncertainty was suffocating, but Sarah clung to the hope that somehow everything would turn out okay. The room was a blur of lights, sounds, and hurried voices as the emergency response team continued their work. Sarah stood at the edge of Emma's hospital bed, her hands trembling as she held her daughter's small hand. Her heart was still heavy with fear, but now there was something else. Hope. The team had arrived quickly, and they were working tirelessly to understand what was happening to Emma. It was clear from their focused expressions that they were determined to get to the bottom of this strange situation. Sarah couldn't help but notice the difference in the room now. The urgency had changed, the tension had lifted, and for the first time in hours, Sarah felt like there was a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. The doctors and nurses were more relaxed, less frantic, as they reviewed the test results and examined Emma with more care. They were beginning to have answers, and that alone gave Sarah the smallest bit of relief. Emma, still pale and exhausted, lay quietly in the bed, her wide eyes watching the doctors move around the room. She didn't speak much, but every now and then, she would squeeze Sarah's hand tightly, as if seeking comfort in her presence. Sarah brushed her daughter's hair from her face, trying her best to stay calm, but the worry in her eyes was unmistakable. "Mommy, what's happening?" Emma whispered, her voice barely audible. "Is everything going to be okay?" Sarah's heart broke at the question, but she forced a reassuring smile. "Everything's going to be fine, sweetheart. The doctors are going to help you, and we'll get through this together, okay?" Emma nodded weakly, her small lips trembling slightly. It was clear that she was still scared, but she trusted her mother's comforting words. That trust was all Sarah had to hold on to now, as she continued to fight the overwhelming fear in her chest. A few moments later, the door to the room opened, and Dr. Jennings, the lead physician, walked in. He was holding a folder with Emma's test results in hand, and for the first time that day, his face showed signs of relief. He looked at Sarah, his expression softening as he approached her. "Mrs. Williams, I have good news," Dr. Jennings began, his tone calm and reassuring. "We've done a thorough examination, and we believe we found the cause of Emma's condition." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Good news. After all the fear and uncertainty, she couldn't believe it. "What's happening, doctor? What's wrong with my daughter?" Dr. Jennings smiled gently. "It's not as serious as we originally feared. Emma's symptoms are the result of a rare but treatable condition called pseudocyesis, a false pregnancy. Essentially, Emma's body was showing signs of pregnancy, including the swollen abdomen, but there was no actual baby. Her body was simply mimicking the symptoms of pregnancy, which can be triggered by hormonal imbalances or psychological factors." Sarah's mind reeled as she tried to process the doctor's words. False pregnancy. Emma wasn't really pregnant, but her body was acting as if she were. It sounded unbelievable, yet the explanation made sense. The doctors had ruled out other potential causes, and this was the most likely explanation for Emma's condition. Dr. Jennings continued, "While this condition is rare in children, it's not unheard of. The good news is that with the right treatment and support, Emma should recover fully. We'll monitor her closely for the next few days to make sure the symptoms subside, and we'll work with a pediatric endocrinologist to address any underlying hormonal imbalances." Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her, but there was still one more thing she had to know. "Is she going to be okay, doctor? I mean, is there anything we need to worry about going forward?" Dr. Jennings nodded, his smile widening. "She will be just fine, Mrs. Williams. This condition is usually temporary, and with the proper care, Emma will be back to her usual self in no time. It's very important that she gets emotional support too, as this experience has likely been very frightening for her." Sarah felt her body relax for the first time in hours. The weight that had been pressing on her chest finally lifted, and she let out a long, shaky breath. Her daughter was going to be okay. Emma wasn't going to be scarred by this experience. She was going to recover. "Thank you," Sarah whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "I can't tell you how much this means to me." Dr. Jennings gave her a reassuring smile. "You're welcome. We're here to help." As the doctor left the room to make arrangements for Emma's treatment, Sarah sat down beside her daughter's bed. She couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. She had come so close to losing herself in fear and panic, but now there was hope. Emma was going to be okay. They were going to be okay. Emma, who had been quiet during the exchange, finally spoke again. "Mommy, are we going home soon?" Sarah nodded, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, sweetheart. Very soon. You're going to be just fine. We're going to take care of you, and everything's going to be all right." Emma smiled weakly, her eyes still heavy with exhaustion, but her small smile was enough to reassure Sarah that the worst was behind them. The ordeal had been long and terrifying, but it was ending on a hopeful note. Sarah knew that this experience would stay with her forever. The fear, the uncertainty, and the overwhelming love she felt for her daughter. But now she could finally exhale. As the sun began to set outside the hospital window, Sarah sat beside her daughter, holding her hand, knowing that they had weathered the storm together. They had faced the unknown and come out stronger on the other side. The journey was far from over, but for the first time that day, Sarah felt like everything was going to be okay.